This is a Justice for All and Dunce News Network report. We previously reported on the killing of Jaden Diaz. Now that we have gathered more evidence, we can present the complete story with all the facts. The evidence we have collected strongly disputes the police narrative of the events and suggests a possible case of premeditated murder of an innocent young man by two officers of the Matura police station. We will use the police media release, quoted exactly as it appears in the Daily Express, in our crime scene recreation illustration. This will highlight the discrepancies and deliberate misinformation that seem intended to cover up the facts of the case, which should lead to the arrest and charges of two officers for murder. A 20-year-old Matura man was shot and killed by police on Thursday afternoon after officers reported coming under threat while responding to a report in the lower Rio Grande area. The deceased has been identified as Jaden Diaz of lower Rio Grande, Matura, according to a Trinidad and Tobago Police Service report. Officers attached to the Matura police station responded to a report around 5 p.m. at lower Rio Grande Road. Police said Sergeant Hazel and PC Batiste proceeded along a gravel roadway to an unpainted concrete structure near Diaz's home, where they encountered the 20-year-old. The officers reported that while making inquiries, they observed what appeared to be cannabis plants growing to the rear of the premises. Police alleged that Diaz suddenly ran toward the back of the house, holding an object resembling a firearm. PC Batiste reportedly shouted for him to stop, but Diaz ran into the house. According to the police report, the officer pursued Diaz into the building, where he allegedly pointed the object in the officer's direction. Believing his life was in immediate danger, an officer shot Diaz. A firearm and several rounds of ammunition were subsequently recovered at the scene, police said. Diaz was taken to the Sandy Grande Hospital, where he was pronounced dead on arrival. The case presented here was consistent with the police report and the TTPS media release. We did not alter any part of the police narrative. Now we're going to break down each element of this incident down and show why the killing of Jaden Diaz was unjustified and most likely a premeditated murder. First, the alleged disturbance report. This is the most easily verified elements in this case. This can be verified in the police station diary. Jaden was working and staying with his aunt and uncle and saving money. Jaden's aunt and uncle, along with their 6-month-old baby, lived in a relatively isolated area. There were no neighbors visible from the road, and the closest neighbor, who lived across the road, had left her property about a year ago. If you follow the road further, it would lead into a forest where other people lived far apart from each other. That morning, Jaden's uncle left for work early. Jaden and his aunt, with her 6-month-old baby, spent the day harvesting mangoes. Jaden had received an invitation from a man in the area with a laden mango tree to pick out the entire tree, as he supplied businesses with mangoes and other fruits. Therefore, Jaden and his aunt were out for most of the day gathering mangoes. They returned home about an hour before the police showed up, during which time Jaden was preparing the mangoes for delivery to a business that had purchased them. This can be verified by the person who owned the mango tree, as well as by phone records and text messages exchanged between Jaden and his mother and between Jaden's mother and his aunt. Consequently, the reported disturbance that the police used to justify their visit to Jaden's uncle and aunt's house cannot be substantiated. No one in that house made a disturbance report, and there were no neighbors available to report one either. The second piece of evidence we will examine is the police justification that there were cannabis plants growing to the rear of the premises. Unless Sergeant Hazel and PC Batiste are 30 feet tall, or was in a flying police car, there is absolutely no way to see in the back of that house from the road. That is point number one, but it's not the most important point. Let's apply some relevant law to this situation. According to Section 6 of the Trinidad and Tobago Dangerous Drug Act, Act Number 24, 2019, a person, which is an adult, can grow 4 or fewer cannabis plants and is exempt from prosecution for possession of such growing plants. This means an individual can have no more than 4 plants growing. In this case, there was only one small plant growing in a pot, about 2 feet tall. Regardless of whether anyone saw that plant, which was impossible to see, the people living in that house were in full compliance with the law. End of story. We don't need to go any further. The justification regarding illegal cannabis that led to the killing of Jaden at his uncle's and aunt's house is completely unfounded. It cannot be upheld in any court of law and does not justify the use of force by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service in the killing of Jaden. The third piece of evidence we examine is the shooting itself. The police narrative that Jaden ran out of a house with a gun, then ran back inside and turned around to point the gun at them, is absurd enough to warrant a mental evaluation for those officers at St. Anne Hospital. According to the police, the incident began at 3:05 p.m. However, Jaden was so proud and excited about picking out an entire tree of mangoes that he was on the phone with his mother throughout the afternoon. He went through the steps of preparing the mangoes to deliver to the business that purchased them. In his excitement, he accidentally cut himself badly. It wasn't just a cut, but a severe injury, and he could have lost part of his finger. He needed to go to the emergency room, as documented by phone records that can be legally verified, showing he was on the phone at 2:56 p.m. with his mother showing her his chopped finger. Remember, the police stated that their incident happened at 3:05 p.m. Jaden couldn't even hold his hand up, much less run out of a house with a gun, and then turn to shoot at the police. However, that is not the most significant evidence in this case. The entrance wound on Jaden's body was in his back, and the exit wound was in his chest. This can be verified by any competent pathologist, emergency room nurses, or emergency medical technicians who treat gunshot wounds. They can clearly identify what constitutes an entrance wound versus an exit wound. You don't even need to see the body. Distinctive marks on the body indicate which is which. The most obvious distinction is that the entrance wound is smaller, while the exit wound is larger. There are other aspects related to how a bullet affects the tissues of the body when it enters and exits, which can also be clearly seen. We don't even need to elaborate further into this. Any competent doctor can just look at these images of Jaden gunshots and determine the entrance and exit wounds. How did Jaden get a gun shot in his back? Well, remember that Jaden had a bad cut on his finger, which required a trip to the hospital emergency room. At the time, he was in the house near the bathroom sink, while his aunt held her 6-month-old baby. She watched as Jaden wrapped tissue around his finger to absorb the blood and create a makeshift bandage. Suddenly, Jaden's aunt saw 2 policemen rush into the house while Jaden's back was turned. There was no warning. One of the officers, identified as PC Batiste, shot Jaden in the back, causing him to fall to the ground. The evidence shows that Jaden's blood was found on the inside wall near the bathroom, far from the center of the house or the hallway, where police claimed Jaden had turned to shoot at them. The police entered the house through the front door, which was wide open. Sergeant Hazel and PC Batiste quickly ran inside, and Jaden was shot in the back. As Jaden lay on the ground, bleeding and crying for help, Sergeant Hazel shouted obscenities at his aunt, ordering her to leave the house. He continued to curse at her until she finally left with the baby. Blood from Jaden splattered on the baby, and she wasn't even given a chance to wipe the blood off as Jaden lay dying on the floor. Afterward, Sergeant Hazel and PC Batiste searched the house for about 30 to 45 minutes, but didn't find anything incriminating. Eventually, Sergeant Hazel took hold of one of Jaden's legs while PC Batiste grabbed one of his hands, dragged him out of the house, and tossed him into the back of their van. Later, PC Batiste returned to the house with other officers 3 hours after the incident. He went into the backyard, then approached Jaden's aunt saying, "Look what we found." The police had previously claimed that Jaden ran out of the house with a gun, went back inside with a gun, and then turned to point it at them, prompting them to shoot him in self-defense. However, PC Batiste returned 3 hours later and said he found a gun. You might think the story can't get any worse, but it does. Everything reported here is accurate, verifiable, and will hold up in a court of law. But it gets worse. After Sergeant Hazel and PC Batiste searched the house for about 45 minutes, they transported Jaden, placing him in the back of their vehicle. Instead of heading directly to the hospital, which was about 20 to 25 kilometers away, they waited for a second vehicle, then moved Jaden from their vehicle to the back cabin of a police SUV. He was still alive and could have been saved. Unfortunately, as the 2 police vehicles proceeded with Jaden unsecured and bleeding in the back cabin, the police vehicle rolled down an embankment with Jaden unsecured in the back and ended up in a ditch. It remains unclear how the accident occurred, as it did not involve another vehicle, and no reports can be found in the media regarding this incident or any injuries to police officers involved. Instead of rushing Jaden, now an accident victim as well as a gunshot victim, to the hospital, the police officers halted traffic on the road for over 2 hours while Jaden lay in the ditch, groaning in pain. There were at least 12 officers at the scene, including a high-ranking ASB who was aware that Jaden was in the ditch. From the time Jaden was shot at the house to the time he ended up in the ditch, at least 3 hours elapsed. However, it gets worse. Between the house and the Sandy Grande Hospital, someone shot Jaden in the finger. He did not leave the house with 2 gunshot wounds. He initially had 1 gunshot in his back that exited through his chest. By the time he reached the hospital, he had a gunshot in his back and another in his finger. It can only be assumed that whoever shot Jaden in the finger was trying to create a scenario where he got shot while holding a gun, attempting to explain the gunshot in his back. However, forensics will reveal a different story, as the location of the gunshot on Jaden's finger does not align to proper ballistic trajectory, suggesting the shot could have come from a police officer defending himself. Forensic crime scene investigation is virtually non-existent in Trinidad and Tobago, and police officers are often unaware of how forensics can impact a case. Therefore, any attempt to fabricate a false shooting will likely be debunked by proper forensic analysis. When forensic or CSI personnel are on the scene, it may appear they are conducting a thorough investigation, but in reality, they are just playing games. Character is very important in life. However, when investigating possible homicides and other serious cases, background should not be a factor in how cases are handled. Background should be irrelevant unless they help solve the case. While we don't usually discuss backgrounds, we wanted to highlight Jaden Diaz in this instance to inform the public about what Trinidad and Tobago has lost due to the actions of these 2 police officers. Jaden Diaz was raised well by parents. He was a high achiever and an intelligent young man who passed for his first choice school, St. Anthony's College. During his time at St. Anthony's, he was frequently recognized by teachers and the principal for his charismatic nature, righteousness, and intelligence. At only 20 years old, Jaden was an entrepreneur with his own small business and served as a mentor to young men in his community, encouraging them to stay on the right path and make positive choices. He was also involved in community service, working to clean up public areas that had been neglected by government agencies. Throughout his life, Jaden never committed a single criminal act and did not have a criminal record. After finishing school, he moved abroad but decided to return home to open a business and contribute to his community, as he was committed to serving others. He decided to move back abroad to further his studies and gain experience with the hope of returning to Trinidad and Tobago to share his knowledge. Jaden was in Matura staying with his aunt to work and save money for his return trip to Europe. Jaden worked cutting lumber for a company and supplied fruits to local businesses to gather the funds he needed. He was a devoted and disciplined Muslim who avoided negative influences and harmful habits. After work each day, Jaden would spend his time at home reading the Quran. This is who Jaden Diaz was. In examining the character of Jaden Diaz, it is also essential to consider the character of the police officers involved in his death and the integrity of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that allows such incidents to occur with impunity. Let's begin with Police Officer Marcus Batiste. His name has arisen in numerous instances of questionable behavior that do not reflect the standard expected of a police officer. One significant event involved him firing multiple shots at residences in his community after a confrontation with a resident. This incident was never properly investigated. It appears that someone in a very senior position within the TTPS is protecting Batiste and others like him. In this shooting incident with PC Batiste, a story was planted in the media claiming that PC Batiste was defending a 17-year-old girl as a justification for his reckless actions.
That's what I'm telling all you. That's what I'm telling all you. You understand? Yeah. You better make sure nobody can get picked up there. Eh? You better make sure nobody can get picked up.
It's on tape, the one.
Yeah. Shoot me too. You gotta shoot me too. You gotta shoot me too. Make sure.
Sergeant Devin Hazel is the station commander of the Matura Police Station. He is responsible for providing moral, legal, and ethical leadership to the officers under his command and is expected to set an example as a leader. However, Sergeant Hazel has many questions to answer regarding the killing of Jaden Diaz, as he was in charge and is the highest-ranking officer at the station. The main question that Sergeant Hazel needs to address is, why Jaden? Why is there no report linking the house to any disturbance? Who shot Jaden in his finger after he was taken into custody? Why did you verbally abuse a woman holding a baby in her own house? Additionally, why was you, Sergeant Hazel, as the station commander, responding to a relatively minor disturbance report with a police constable when there were other officers available at the station? Who did you leave to run the station? If you have any question for the sergeant regarding this case, we would like to hear them, along with any concerns you may have. Additionally, the Matura police denies that a police vehicle crashed off the road into a ditch with Jaden inside the vehicle. Many people took pictures of the police vehicle and Jaden in the ditch. If you believe in righteousness and justice, please share those pictures.